I will present to you tonight the very clear evidence, as I believe, that all three World Trade Center high-rise buildings, the iconic Twin Towers and Building 7, were destroyed not by fire, as our government has told us, but by controlled demolition with explosives. We have a website at ad911truth.org. You can see the evidence lined up on the right, and there's lots of resources for you. Why have over 280 architects and engineers demanded a new investigation, sacrificing in some cases reputations and in some cases much more? And engineers. Why do 36% of Americans consider it very likely or somewhat likely that government officials either allowed the attacks to happen or carried them out themselves? We're going to find out why. In 2007, a news audit poll says 51% of Americans want Congress to probe the president and vice president regarding these attacks. Why do 209 9/11 survivors and family members want a new probe? 110 military, intelligence, law enforcement, and government officials, 170 distinguished professors, 110 entertainment and media professionals, and Willie Nelson joining them last week. Woo! Thank you, Willie. We hope to hear a whole lot more from Willie on this subject. Now, we were subjected to shocking attacks for the first time, really, on American soil, killing thousands of people and destroying these cultural icons. The 6 years since has actually given us some time to step back and look at these events more objectively and look at the evidence that has come out in only the last couple of years. Very, very important evidence that many people would like to deny. But before we jump right into it, let's take a look at the jets, the impacts, the collapses, and the development of this myth, which has gripped our society.
On September 11th, we learned that 4 passenger planes were hijacked and taken radically off course. Within an hour, 2 of the planes had flown into the enormous steel towers of the World Trade Center, creating fires and eventually toppling them. Dazed by the news, the American public soon believed the fires in the towers had burned so hot they caused the steel frames of the building to give way. A myth developed, fed by official sources through the media to a bewildered audience. Elements of the myth. The impact of the airplanes, gallons of burning jet fuel, steel melting, the building failing and suddenly imploding. In a mere 10 seconds, 110 stories hurtled earthward, pulverizing into dust. Right from the start, on the street itself, the official story was born.
Come out of nowhere, it just screamed right into the side of the Twin Tower, exploding through the other side. And then I witnessed both towers collapse, one first and then the second, mostly due to structural failure because the fire was just too intense.
The myth bled into the FEMA report and was echoed by the experts.
It was the combination of the impact load doing great damage to the building, followed by the fire that caused collapse.
That was timely. Now, where do people like this come from on the street who have the story? They talk like eyewitness.
Yeah.
I mean, who talks like that? We were all in a state of shock that morning. This guy's talking objectively, and he has the reason that engineers are still struggling over as to why these buildings collapsed. Very, very interesting that the first people on the street have this story. Let's turn down the lights up front so we can see the scientific method, perhaps for the first time since 9/11 for some of us. Now, we learned this as 6th graders pretty much. We start with a question. This is the scientific method. We ask a question. usually a scientific question, okay? And then we go about gathering data, and then we do background research, and we construct a hypothesis. What is the possible answer to this question? Then we proceed to test this with experiments. Experiments are extremely important. They've been in use ever since Isaac Newton, and we're going to look at some experiments today. Really, really important stuff, because we use those experiments to analyze results and to draw conclusions. So we can test our hypothesis to find out whether it's false, in which case we try again with another hypothesis. We adjust it and repeat the cycle until we have some clarity. Or if it's true, we get lucky and we go right to reporting our results in an open manner, befitting a civilized, rational society that doesn't have anything to hide. So let's apply it as to the theory of fire, which says that the buildings were hit by airplanes, as you saw, and fires brought these weakened steel, and the building came down in kind of an implosion or explosion. We'll discuss that in a moment. Alternatively, the other hypothesis that was not even looked at by NIST, despite, as you'll see, quite a bit of evidence that suggests that it's a viable hypothesis, is controlled demolition. So we'll talk about that. First, fire. Now, fire is an organic process. It moves around the building every 20 minutes or so as it consumes the available material, office furniture and so forth, in the building. And when there is a collapse, and as you'll see, there's never been a collapse in a steel frame building, steel frame high-rise building, which are fire protected. But when, say, a wood building, a wood frame building, you have what starts as with large, slow, gradual deformations, and it tends to fall over, obeying the path of least resistance. It doesn't go straight down through its structure, and it's an asymmetrical process. We have earthquakes which bring buildings down. We'll talk about that in a moment. We have explosions also. Well, let's take a look first at these earthquake-induced collapses. The building tends to hang together because its structure, while damaged, it doesn't pulverize into dust or decompose into its constituent beams and columns. This is not what happens. You tend to see what you can fairly easily recognize as a building down at the bottom. These are explosions. We have sounds of explosions, flashes of light, almost a geometry of fireworks, just up and out. We have pyroclastic clouds of pulverized concrete, which are heat-induced. You tend to see this cauliflower-like formations. This is because of the incredible amount of heat produced by these explosives. Well, let's see what demolished these three skyscrapers. Building 7, World Trade Center 7 down here, and also the Twin Towers. Again, let's take a look and follow the scientific method. Looking at the controlled demolition theory, we start by doing some background research. We have hundreds of examples from all across the country from which to make our comparison of controlled demolition to Building 7, which we'll start with, because it's the most commonly used method to demolish high-rise buildings. This is what a high-rise looks like when it's being demolished with explosives. Controlled demolitions can be engineered in many different ways. Normally, the purpose of a controlled demolition is to remove the structure while avoiding damage to adjacent structures, and to do so economically. So typically, a tall building is demolished by placing thousands of cutter charges throughout the beams and columns in the building, and then detonating them in a very precise order. And they're synchronistically timed floor by floor. Destroying the interior columns allows the unsupported weight to pull the exterior downward or inward, and destroying the building from the ground up allows the weight of the building to be harnessed to do much of the destruction. The result then is an implosion, a classic controlled demolition like you've all seen in Las Vegas on TV, producing a vertical symmetrical collapse, as you see here, at virtually free fall speed. No resistance. It's into a consolidated rubble pile, which is broken up and ready for loading and shipment. Now, this is a feat that only a handful of companies in the United States can accomplish.